What happens when two Hollywood legends collide in front of millions of viewers? What happens when respect turns to rage and professional courtesy crumbles into chaos? Today, we dive into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history, where Denzel Washington and Whoopi Goldberg turned The View into a battlefield that nobody saw coming. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think went too far. Now, let's get into what really happened. The studio lights were blazing as usual that morning, the familiar energy of The View filling the air. Denzel Washington sat comfortably in the guest chair, his trademark smile warming the faces of the co-hosts around the table. The interview had started smoothly enough, with the typical banter about his latest film project and his decades-long career in Hollywood. But beneath the surface, tensions were already beginning to simmer. So Whoopi began, leaning forward with that authoritative tone she's known for. You've been in this industry for what, 40 years now? You've seen it change dramatically. What do you think about some of the conversations we're having today about representation and accountability in Hollywood? Denzel shifted slightly in his seat, his expression thoughtful. Well, Whoopi, I think every generation has to find its own way. I've always believed in earning your place through hard work and dedication. That's what opened doors for me, and that's what I tell young actors today, regardless of their background. The other co-hosts nodded appreciatively, but something flickered across Whoopi's face, a tightness around her eyes that suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied with that answer. But surely you understand that not everyone has had the same opportunities. Whoopi pressed, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. Some barriers exist that hard work alone can't break down. Don't you think the industry has a responsibility to actively address those systemic issues? Denzel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I think the industry's responsibility is to tell great stories and hire the best people for the job. When you start making decisions based on anything other than talent and merit, you're doing a disservice to everyone involved, including the very people you're trying to help. A murmur rippled through the studio audience. The other co-hosts exchanged glances, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Whoopi's fingers drummed once against the table, a telltale sign that she was gearing up for something bigger. That's an interesting perspective, Whoopi said, her tone now carrying a weight that made everyone lean in. But it sounds a bit like someone who's already made it to the top, telling everyone else to just work harder. Don't you think that's a little tone-deaf? The studio fell silent. Denzel's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since he'd sat down, his famous composure showed cracks. Tone-deaf. I've worked my entire life to get where I am. I've faced every obstacle you can imagine, and I never asked for any special treatment. I earned every role, every award, every opportunity through dedication and skill. Nobody's questioning your talent, Denzel, Whoopi shot back, her voice rising. But what about using your platform to lift others up? What about acknowledging that your success story isn't possible for everyone, no matter how hard they work? My platform, Denzel's voice was still controlled, but there was steel underneath it now. I've mentored countless young actors. I've produced films that showcase diverse talent. I've put my money where my mouth is more times than I can count, but I refuse to apologize for believing that excellence should be the standard. The tension in the studio was palpable now. The audience sat in stunned silence, watching two titans of entertainment square off in real time. The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to intervene but weren't sure how. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, a cold smile playing at her lips. Excellence is the standard. That's rich coming from someone who's benefited from an industry that historically excluded people who looked just like you. You think you got every role purely on merit. You think there wasn't some executive somewhere who decided it was time to give the black guy a chance. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Denzel's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles whitening. The careful mask of celebrity politeness was beginning to slip away entirely. Are you seriously suggesting, Denzel said, his voice low and dangerous, that my 40-year career is built on charity? That every director who hired me, every producer who backed my films, every audience member who bought a ticket was just throwing me a bone? I'm suggesting, Whoopi replied, matching his intensity, that none of us exist in a vacuum. Your success, my success, everyone's success, is influenced by factors beyond pure talent, and pretending otherwise is naive at best and harmful at worst. The other co-hosts were now visibly uncomfortable, shooting desperate looks at the producers off camera. But there was no stopping this train wreck now. The two powerhouses were locked in a battle of wills that was rapidly spiraling beyond anyone's control. Denzel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what, Whoopi? I've sat here and listened to you question my integrity, my work ethic, and my understanding of my own career. I've been respectful because I respect this show, and I respect you. But if you want to reduce everything I've accomplished to some kind of diversity hire, then we have a serious problem. Whoopi rose to meet him, her own chair pushed back. Nobody called you a diversity hire, but if that's what you heard, maybe. That says more about your own insecurities than anything. I said, The words hit like a slap. Denzel's composure finally cracked completely, his voice thundering across the studio. Insecurities. Lady, I have nothing to be insecure about. I've earned every single thing in my life. But what I won't tolerate is sitting here while you try to diminish my legacy to make some political point. The studio erupted. Audience members gasped and murmured, some pulling out phones to capture what was clearly becoming television history. The other co-hosts were on their feet now, trying desperately to regain control of the situation. But Whoopi wasn't backing down. Her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Your legacy isn't under attack, Denzel, but your perspective is outdated. And frankly, it's disappointing. I expected better from someone of your stature. That was the moment everything changed. Denzel's face transformed, the last vestiges of his public persona falling away to reveal raw, unfiltered anger. Outdated, disappointing. You want to talk about disappointing? Let's talk about how you've turned this platform into a soapbox for your own agenda instead of celebrating the achievements of your guests. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Whoopi's eyes flashed with a fury that matched Denzel's, and suddenly the professional facade that both had maintained for decades in the public eye was completely shattered. My agenda? Whoopi's voice was ice-cold now, each word delivered with surgical precision. My agenda is giving a voice to people who've been silenced for too long. My agenda is making sure that the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles we did. But apparently, that threatens you. Denzel stepped closer to the table, his imposing presence filling the space between them. What threatens me is watching someone I once respected use their platform to tear down anyone who doesn't fall in line with their thinking. You're not giving anyone a voice, Whoopi. You're silencing anyone who dares to disagree with you. The studio was in complete chaos now. Producers were frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, trying to signal for a commercial break, but both stars were too locked in their battle to notice or care. The other co-hosts stood frozen, caught between wanting to intervene and being mesmerized by the raw emotion unfolding before them. Silencing people. Whoopi laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich coming from someone who's spent the last 10 minutes defending a system that silenced people like us for decades. You got yours. So now everyone else should just shut up and work harder, right? Don't you dare. Denzel's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Don't you dare pretend you know what I've been through or what I believe. I've opened more doors for young black actors than you'll ever know. But I did it by proving we belong at the table, not by demanding a seat we haven't earned. Whoopi slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing through the stunned studio. Earned? Who decides what's earned? Denzel. The same executives who told Sidney Poitier he was too black for leading roles. The same system that made Dorothy Dandridge change everything about herself just to get a chance. You think they suddenly became colorblind when your time came? The accusation hit its mark. Denzel's face contorted with rage, and he leaned forward until he was nearly nose to nose with Whoopi across the table. You want to talk about Sidney and Dorothy? They paved the way through excellence, through dignity, through refusing to compromise their integrity. They didn't sit on talk shows making excuses for why other people couldn't follow in their footsteps. Excuses. Whoopi's voice cracked with emotion. These aren't excuses, they're facts. And the fact that you can't see the difference tells me everything I need to know about how out of touch you've become. The other co-hosts were desperately trying to get their attention now. But it was like watching a hurricane. There was no stopping the destruction once it had begun. The audience sat in shocked silence, some covering their mouths in disbelief, others recording every second of the meltdown. Denzel straightened up, his chest heaving with controlled fury. Out of touch. I'm out of touch because I believe in personal responsibility, because I think talent should speak louder than politics, because I refuse to teach young people that they're victims before they even get started. No, Whoopi shot back, rising from her chair to match his energy. You're out of touch because you've forgotten what it was like to be hungry. You've forgotten what it was like to walk into rooms where nobody expected you to succeed. You've gotten so comfortable that you've convinced yourself the game was always fair. The word struck like lightning. Denzel's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, it looked like the confrontation might turn physical. The security team off camera tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. Comfortable. Denzel's voice was barely controlled. Now, you think I'm comfortable? You think I've forgotten where I came from? Lady, I remember every single no, every door slammed in my face, every role I lost because I wasn't what they were looking for. But you know what I did? I got better. I worked harder. I proved them wrong. And what about the people who worked just as hard but didn't get the breaks you got? Whoopi's voice was rising again, her professional composure completely abandoned. What about the talented actors who are still waiting tables because they don't fit someone's narrow definition of marketable? Are they just not working hard enough? Denzel turned away from the table, running his hands over his face in frustration. For a moment, it seemed like he might walk away entirely. But then he spun back around, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made everyone in the studio take a step back. You know what your problem is, Whoopi? You've become so obsessed with being a victim that you can't celebrate success when you see it. You'd rather tear down achievement than build people up. You'd rather make excuses than demand excellence. The accusation hit Whoopi like a physical blow. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger so intense it was almost frightening to witness. A victim, a victim. I've been fighting battles you can't even imagine while you were getting handed starring roles in major motion pictures. I've been speaking truth to power while you were worried about protecting your image. Fighting battles. Denzel's laugh was bitter and cutting. You mean sitting behind this desk every day complaining about how unfair everything is? That's not fighting, that's whining, and frankly, it's beneath you. The insult landed like a grenade. Whoopi's composure shattered completely, her voice becoming a roar that filled every corner of the studio. How dare you? How dare you reduce my career, my activism, my entire life's work to whining? You arrogant, self-righteous, ungrateful. Denzel interrupted, his own voice matching her volume. Ungrateful to who? To an industry that tried to box me in from day one. Two people like you who want to reduce every conversation to race and politics. I'm grateful for my talent, I'm grateful for my opportunities, and I'm grateful that I never let anyone convince me I was less than I am. The studio erupted in gasps and murmurs. Some audience members were standing now, craning their necks to get a better view of the unprecedented meltdown. The other co-hosts looked shell-shocked, completely unable to regain control of their own show. Whoopi pointed an accusing finger across the table. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? You think because you've got your Oscar and your reputation that you can look down on the rest of us who are still fighting for change. Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Washington, your success doesn't give you the right to slam the door behind. You slammed the door. Denzel's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper again. I've held that door open for more people than you'll ever know, but I refuse to apologize for walking through it with my head held high instead of crawling through it on my knees. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch now, both stars breathing heavily, their faces flushed with anger and adrenaline. The energy in the studio was electric and terrifying, like standing in the eye of a storm, knowing that the worst was yet to come. The silence that followed was deafening. Both titans stood frozen, staring at each other across the table like gladiators in an arena, each waiting for the other to make the next move. The studio audience held their collective breath, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Whoopi broke the silence first, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. You know what, Denzel, I've heard enough. For 40 years, I've watched men like you climb to the top and then spend their time lecturing the rest of us about how we should be grateful for scraps. Well, I'm done being lectured by someone who's clearly forgotten his roots. Denzel's eyes narrowed to slits. Forgotten my roots. My roots are in excellence, in integrity, in refusing to let anyone define me by anything other than my work. If that offends you, then maybe the problem isn't with me. The problem, Whoopi's voice was steady now, cold and calculated, is that you've become exactly what you once fought against. You've become the establishment. You've become the gatekeeper. And now you're standing there defending a system that would have crushed you if people like me hadn't fought to change it. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Denzel stepped closer to the table, his presence commanding and intimidating. People like you, what exactly have you changed? Whoopi, besides turning every conversation into a grievance session, besides making young artists believe they're victims before they even try. I've changed the conversation, Whoopi shot back, her finger jabbing toward him accusingly. I've made it possible for people to speak their truth without worrying about whether it makes people like you uncomfortable, and if that bothers you, then maybe you should ask yourself why. Denzel laughed, but there was no humor in it, only contempt. The truth. You want to talk about truth? The truth is that you've turned victimhood into a career. The truth is that you've made more money complaining about the system than most people make participating in it. The truth is that you've forgotten what it means to inspire people instead of just making them angry. The words hit Whoopi like a physical slap. Her face went white, then red, her hands shaking with fury. How dare you question my motivations? How dare you reduce my entire career to playing victim? I've fought battles you don't even know exist. Fighting battles, Denzel's voice was dripping with disdain now. You mean sitting behind this desk every day, safe and comfortable, talking about how terrible everything is? That's not fighting, that's performing, and frankly, it's a disservice to people who are actually out there making a difference. The studio erupted in gasps. Several audience members stood up, some shouting in support of one star or the other. The other co-hosts were frantically trying to signal the producers, but the train wreck was moving too fast to stop now. Whoopi's composure finally shattered completely. She stood up so abruptly that her chair toppled backward, her voice becoming a roar that echoed through the entire studio. You sanctimonious, arrogant, self-righteous hypocrite. You sit there, in your ivory tower, looking down on everyone else, judging us for not being grateful enough, for not being quiet enough, for not knowing our place. Knowing your place. Denzel's voice matched her volume now, both stars screaming at each other across the table. Your place is supposed to be elevating people, inspiring them, showing them what's possible. Instead, you've turned this platform into a place where success is suspicious and achievement is something to be ashamed of. My platform, Whoopi, was beyond rational thought now, years of frustration and anger pouring out in a torrent. This is my show. This is my house. And I won't sit here and let some washed-up actor who thinks his Oscar makes him untouchable come in here and disrespect everything I've built. The insult landed like a bomb. Denzel went completely still, his face a mask of cold fury that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier outbursts. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but filled with such venom that it cut through all the chaos in the studio. Washed up. Lady, I've forgotten more about acting than you'll ever know. And as for my Oscar, I earned it. Just like I earned every role, every accolade, every opportunity I've ever had. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? Because you've spent so long making excuses for failure that you've forgotten what success actually looks like. Whoopi screamed, actually screamed, her voice cracking with the effort. Get out. Get out of my studio right now. I don't have to sit here and listen to this garbage from someone who sold his soul to the very system he should be fighting. Denzel stood perfectly still for a moment, staring at her with undisguised contempt. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up and unclipped his microphone, letting it drop to the floor with a loud thud that echoed through the stunned silence. You know what, Whoopi? His voice was calm now, almost conversational, which somehow made it even more devastating. You're right, I shouldn't be here. This used to be a show about intelligent conversation and mutual respect. Now it's just a platform for bitter people to tear down anyone who dares to succeed without apologizing for it. He turned toward the audience, his commanding presence filling the entire studio. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you prioritize politics over people, when you choose division over unity, when you decide that tearing others down is more important than building them up. Whoopi was beside herself now, her face purple with rage. Security, security, get him out of here. Get him out of my studio right now. But Denzel wasn't finished. He turned back to face her one last time, his eyes blazing with a fury that had been building throughout the entire confrontation. You want me gone? Fine, but remember this moment, because this is the moment you chose hate over hope, division over unity, and bitterness over greatness. The security team was moving toward him now, but Denzel raised his hand to stop them. Don't worry, I'm leaving. I wouldn't want to spend another second in a place where success is treated like a crime, and excellence is seen as arrogance. He started walking toward the exit, his stride confident and purposeful, despite the chaos erupting around him. But Whoopi wasn't done. She was screaming after him, her voice hoarse and desperate. That's right, run away. Run back to your mansion and your awards and pretend like the real world doesn't exist. But don't you ever come back here and try to lecture me about what I should be doing. Denzel stopped at the studio door and turned back one final time. His voice cut through her screaming like a knife through silk. The only lecture here today was watching a once great artist reduce herself to this. And that's a tragedy that no amount of politics can fix. With that, he walked out, leaving behind a studio in complete chaos, an audience in shock, and a co-host so enraged that she was still screaming long after he'd disappeared from view. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the meltdown that would become one of the most talked about moments in television history. The other co-host sat in stunned silence, unsure how to proceed. While Whoopi continued her tirade to an empty chair, her fury so complete that she seemed unaware that her target had already left the building. This was the moment that proved sometimes the most explosive television happens when two unstoppable forces collide and neither one is willing to back down. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Did Denzel go too far, or was Whoopi out of line? Subscribe, and let me know in the comments whether you think either of these legends can recover from this public meltdown.